1943. Across the globe, the tide of war began to turn. Allied forces landed on the Italian mainland in September, and the Eastern Front saw Soviet advances. But in the China-Burma-India Theatre, or CBI, progress remained stalled. This was a theatre defined by immense logistical hurdles, fierce political infighting, and a profound distrust between key Allied leaders. At the heart of the American effort was General Joseph Stilwell. Vinegar Joe, as he was known, possessed a no-nonsense drive, yet he found himself constantly at odds with China's leader Chiang Kai-shek. Their clashes stemmed from deeply differing strategic priorities and personality conflicts. Stilwell wanted to train and equip a modern Chinese army to fight the Japanese in Burma. Chiang, however, feared empowering his own generals, seeing them as potential rivals. This internal strife was further exacerbated by the ambitions of Claire Chennault, commander of the 14th Air Force. Chennault believed air power alone could win the war in China, a view Stilwell dismissed as messianic hot air and sold the wrong bill of goods. Stilwell saw Chennault as an ambitious rival seeking to usurp his command. Logistical nightmares loomed large. The aerial supply route over the Himalayas, dubbed the Hump, was a constant challenge, and the monumental Ledo Road, dubbed Pick's Pike after its designer, General Louis Pick, remained largely unfinished. These were not mere inconveniences, but direct impediments to training and equipping the 33. Chiang Kai-shek and his brother-in-law, T.V. Sung, foreign minister, repeatedly lobbied Washington for Stilwell's recall. This political sabotage constantly threatened the American command structure. The CBI theatre was, by many accounts, a mad, unhappy grotesquerie. Then, a crucial turning point arrived. In October 1943, Stilwell travelled to Chongqing, learning of yet another demand for his removal. But a new figure entered the fray. Lord Louis Mountbatten, the charismatic new commander of Southeast Asian Command, CC. Mountbatten's strategic diplomacy, even including a personal gift of a Cartier makeup compact, proved pivotal. He leveraged Lend-Lease aid, securing Stilwell's continued command. This intervention fundamentally altered the political landscape, allowing momentum to finally build. By December 1943, Lend-Lease supplies to China via the Hump saw a significant increase, reaching 13,450 tons. More importantly, after initial skirmishes, Chiang Kai-shek granted Stilwell complete command and control of the X-Force. This was a critical empowerment, allowing Stilwell to finally execute his strategic vision. The true test came on December 24, 1943. At Yupanga, the Chinese X-Force, with Stilwell personally present, achieved a decisive victory. Against a purportedly invincible Japanese division, the X-Force inflicted heavy casualties, sustaining 315 Chinese casualties of their own. This victory dramatically boosted troop confidence and signaled a tangible shift in battlefield fortunes. It debunked the myth of Japanese invincibility, demonstrating that determined Chinese troops properly led and equipped could defeat them. The gradual completion of the Ledo Road and its accompanying fuel pipelines represented another breakthrough. Engineer battalions, including the only African-American engineer unit in the Pacific, the 858 Engineer Aviation Battalion, moved 3/4 of a mile of roadbed per day. This involved moving 13.5 million cubic yards of earth in just 15 months, constructing 700 bridges across 10 major rivers and 155 secondary streams. Along the route, chilling remnants of the 1942 retreat lay, skeletons and abandoned vehicles, a stark reminder of the campaign's human cost. This period, from September 1943 onward, marked a profound transition. The CBI theatre moved from stalled fronts to tangible operational progress, most notably the beginnings of the push into northern Burma. It validated Stilwell's tenacity, his unwavering commitment despite immense political pressure. It also highlighted a shifting sentiment in Washington, which was beginning to deprioritize CBI in favor of the island-hopping campaign in the Pacific. The successes in Burma, therefore, were not just victories, but critical for the theatre's very survival. By January 1944, General Joe Stilwell was personally leading the push deeper into Burma. His battle plan, concise and determined, was, "We have to go in through a rat hole and dig the hole as we go." This was warfare at its most visceral. Stilwell, sleeping on a cot, bathing from his helmet, and cleaning his own weapon embodied the hands-on leadership necessary in this unforgiving environment. The campaign in North Burma was a brutal and complex undertaking. It relied heavily on unconventional warfare and the innovative use of local forces and specialized American units designed to overcome formidable Japanese defenses in an unforgiving terrain. The strategic imperative was clear: reopen supply lines into China and defeat the entrenched Japanese 18th Division. By early February 1944, Stilwell's X-Force had already pushed the Japanese 75 miles south. This was not a conventional advance. It was a new paradigm for warfare in Burma, proving that unconventional and guerrilla tactics could be as decisive as traditional assaults. A key development was the inception and deployment of Detachment 1-1, a clandestine unit of the Office of Strategic Services (OSS), invented by Millard P. Goodfellow, a Brooklyn newspaperman turned government advisor, and encouraged by OSS Director General William Wild Bill Donovan. Detachment 101 marked a critical shift. Its director, Major Carl Effler, was described as a smart, ferocious, and physically imposing operative instrumental in developing guerrilla tactics. On January 27, 1943, Detachment 101's A Group parachuted into Burma, followed by the O Group in early March. This unit conducted covert operations and intelligence gathering behind enemy lines. Detachment 101 would eventually destroy 57 bridges and 9 trains, recover over 400 Allied flyers and inflict more than 5,400 Japanese casualties, while also destroying over 15,000 tons of their supplies. The Japanese 18th Division, commanded by the wily and seasoned Lieutenant General Shinichi Tanaka, was entrenched at Minquan. Stilwell contemplated not directly assaulting these main Japanese defenses. Instead, he considered unseating them through a less expected approach. This strategic pivot would prove critical. The most famous of these specialized units was Merrill's Marauders, known as Galahad. Command of this elite unit was switched to Stilwell in December 1943. Led by Brigadier General Frank Merrill, a Japanese-language scholar, West Point graduate, and one of Stilwell's most trusted aides, the Marauders represented the pinnacle of unconventional American warfare in the theater. These 2,000 men were tasked with a critical flanking maneuver. On February 7, 1944, the Marauders set off down the Lado Road, addressed by Stilwell at Qingbayang on February 19th. The next day, they split into battalions and entered the Kumon Range. Their objective, to control the Mogong Valley, specifically Shaduzup, as a pathway to Mist Kayana. The campaign's success, however, came at an immense toll. The brutal realities of jungle warfare were relentless. Private Robert Landis became the Marauders' first casualty on February 25, 1944. That same day, Corporal Warner Katz, a Marauder scout, had a near-fatal encounter with a Japanese soldier. A bullet stopped by his wristwatch. Katz's successful shot against the Japanese soldier marked the Marauders' first blood and the commencement of combat. The jungle itself was an enemy. Joseph Gamlin of the 2nd Battalion recalled the leeches, engorged strings hanging off of you. Kind of like half-size sausages. Naga sores infections from leech heads were common, dislodged with lit cigarettes. The terrain was treacherous, filled with tree roots and big rock, the heat oppressive. Disease, not just combat, decimated the Marauders. 109 men were lost to sickness, 19 malaria, 8 jungle fevers, 10 psychoneurosis. Even before intense fighting, mules were essential for transporting heavy radio sets and other equipment, but they were prone to panic from wild tigers and elephants. The Marauders subsisted on K-rations, biscuits, canned protein, cheese, crackers, fruit bars, lemonade, coffee, sugar, chocolate, cigarettes, and gum. D-rations were chocolate bars, often eaten for dysentery. By March 4, 1944, the Marauders were preparing to attack Wollobum. General Tanaka, leading the Japanese 18th Division, responded by redeploying the majority of his forces to Wollobum, prompted by the American flanking pressure. This set the stage for a concentrated clash. That evening, General Merrill radioed Stilwell about the day's events. The next day, March 5th, intense fighting erupted at Wollobum. Mountbatten arrived to observe the front. The Japanese launched 6 banzai charges, supported by 81mm mortars and howitzer shells of 70, 75, and 150mm, and their dreaded tree bursts mortar rounds fired into trees to shower down debris. Marauders responded with Browning automatic rifles and heavy machine guns. A pivotal moment came with the intelligence gathered by Sergeant Roy A. Matsumoto. A Nisei interpreter, Matsumoto captured Japanese communication lines, allowing Allied forces to understand the Japanese command's dire situation and orders to withdraw. Henry Horizontal Hank Gosho, another Nisei interpreter, overheard similar critical orders. These communications confirmed General Tanaka's strategic withdrawal from both Mainquan and Wollobam. The battle for Wollobam was costly. 800 Japanese were killed, while the marauders suffered 8 dead and 37 wounded. On March 6, the Japanese withdrew. On March 9, the Chinese X-Force arrived, and the marauders secured the village. The successful clearing of the Hukong Valley and the capture of Wollobam enabled the X-Force's advance and achieved Stilwell's immediate objective. The formerly formidable Japanese 18th Division, the vanquisher of Singapore, Malaya, and Burma, was severely weakened. This demonstrated how superior Allied logistics and industrial might the USAM but in U.S. industrial spending rising from $40.50 billion in 1941 to $378 in 1944 ultimately undermined the Japanese war effort, even in challenging terrain. By early 1944, Allied soldiers were receiving 4 tons of supplies each, compared to just 2 pounds per Japanese soldier. With Wollobam secured, Stilwell ordered the marauders on their second mission south. The push south by the X-Force created a strategic pincer movement. On March 15, the combined 2nd and 3rd Battalions of Merrill's marauders, nearly 2,000 men, began their deep penetration into the Kumon Range. Their objective, Shaduzap. The belief was that the Japanese expected an attack from the north rather than the west, allowing for surprise tactics. On March 18, the marauders encountered Detachment 101 leader Vincent Curl and his Kachin guerrillas. The Kachin's indigenous forces were invaluable. Detachment 101 had armed them with light and malleable composition C plastic explosive and provided them with potassium cyanide capsules or L-pills for suicide if captured. These guerrillas, along with Naga tribesmen, were a critical asset, their local knowledge and fighting prowess proving Tazantme. By March 19th, the 1st Battalion and Kachins discovered they were south of Shaduzap. Lieutenant Tul Disup, Lieutenant Struckadusup. Colonel William Osborne planned a daring roadblock and attack near Shaduzap. Before dawn, likely March 20th, the marauders crossed the Mogong River to secure the Kameng Road. At 4:30 a.m., forward platoons were across the river, and engagements began immediately with unexpected machine gun fire. This was chaotic, improvised warfare. At 9 a.m., forward platoons requested mortar fire, and by early afternoon, US RBA, Army Air Force bombers attacked Japanese positions. The Chinese artillery from the north, their howitzers, effectively bombarded Japanese positions at Shaduzap. In a single burst, marauder machine gunners killed more than 60 Japanese soldiers. The battle for Shaduzap resulted in 300 Japanese dead and a great loss of supplies. 8 marauders were killed and 35 injured. Meanwhile, a critical concurrent operation was underway. On March 5, 1944, 12,000 Shindits Orde Sea Wingates Special Operations Forces, along with 3,000 mules, began their invasion of Burma by glider. Their initial objective was to establish forward bases behind Japanese lines. This risky glider insertion, however, immediately faced difficulties. Due to the unusable Piccadilly landing site, all Chindit gliders were diverted to the Broadway landing zone, impacting the invasion's momentum. By dawn on March 6th, Brigadier Mad Mike Calvert, leading the initial insertion, radioed Link Sausage to indicate successful, if difficult, landings. Over the next 5 nights, nearly 12,000 Chindits were inserted. Back with the marauders, on March 23rd, their Inca Gatong force arrived, but patrols immediately encountered fierce Japanese resistance. Just past dawn on March 24th, the Japanese launched a ferocious attack, with 16 attack waves throughout the day. Colonel McGee, unit commander of the 2nd Battalion, ordered the evacuation of the Inkagatong blockade. 2 battalions of Japanese troops, 800 or so strong, streamed out of Kameng's headquarters, pursuing the marauders. Lieutenant 2, Kim Bing's headquarters. Colonel Beach and 1st Lieutenant Logan Weston led detachments to delay the Japanese pursuit. This strategic withdrawal led the marauders to Entopgar, a remote, isolated hilltop. On March 24, 1944, the Chindits suffered a profound loss. Their visionary leader, Ord Wingate, was killed in a plane crash. This was a morale-shattering blow, leaving the Chindits rudderless and creating a leadership vacuum. Major General Joe Lintain was selected to lead, but he carried the burden of his predecessor's shadow. The siege of Entpum-Ga, lasting 13 days, was a harrowing ordeal. Roughly 1,100 marauders were initially trapped on the hilltop, 400 yards long and 200 yards wide, surrounded by an estimated 800 heavily armed Japanese attackers. Captain Fred Lyons described the terror of mortar fire and the challenge of spotting Japanese sneakers. Joseph Ganlin recounted the 13-day blur of thirst, hunger, the stench of death, and the constant presence of maggots. Japanese snipers targeted marauders, and their light knee mortars and 70 and 75 mm high-trajectory howitzers rained down on the besieged Americans. By the third morning of the siege, 75 mules were killed by explosions and gunfire. 2 days later, the count rose to 112. By day 5, the marauders were out of water. 500 gallons were parachuted in, a critical but perilous resupply, as some bundles fell wide. Sergeant Roy Matsumoto, the Nisei interpreter who had once been interned, again proved indispensable. His ability to understand the Kyushu dialect of Japanese soldiers allowed him to gather crucial intelligence. When a major Japanese assault was imminent, Matsumoto's warning allowed Lieutenant Edward McLogan to reposition his men and establish defenses in the weak perimeter zone, repelling the attack. After the counterattack, 54 Japanese dead, including 2 officers, were found. Upward of 400 dead Japanese would be found on the slopes. On April 4, 3rd Battalion reinforcements arrived, pushing closer to the hilltop. Command of the marauders shifted to Colonel Hunter after General Merrill was evacuated due to a heart condition. By late afternoon on April 7, 1st Battalion reinforcements became visible. On Easter Sunday, April 9, 1944, the 13-day siege of Entpum-Ga was finally over. Marauder losses at Entpum-Ga amounted to 59 dead and 314 wounded. Despite their exhaustion, the marauders were immediately tasked with a new mission, the end run to Maikikina. This strategic decision by Stilwell to push the marauders further represented a significant escalation of objectives. The end run involved roughly 1,500 marauders, 2 Chinese regiments, and 300 Kachin guerrillas. The perilous crossing of the Kumon Range, with a 6,100-foot altitude gain, tested the limits of their endurance. The 3rd Battalion alone lost 20 mules and abandoned more than 4,000 pounds of equipment in a single day due to the relentless rain and mud. Stilwell's determination, while strategically necessary, generated profound disillusionment and low morale among the marauders. Their spirit became one of "what the hell did you expect anyway?" While the marauders endured their ordeal, elsewhere in Burma, the Chindits continued their struggle. In April 1944, a Chindit patrol ambushed a 30-plus convoy of trucks, carrying as many as 600 dozing Japanese soldiers near Inda. Flamethrowers were used, setting trucks ablaze. It was a highly successful operation, inflicting heavy casualties with minimal losses. But the monsoon season had begun in May, turning the offensive into a defensive struggle. The Chindits established Blackpool, a vital base intended to cut off Japanese supply lines. On May 19, 1944, the Japanese unleashed a large field artillery bombardment. Doc Desmond White, a senior medical officer, recalled the ferocity. 300 shells exploded within the block perimeter. The siege of Blackpool reached its climax on May 23 with a Japanese assault using tree-burst barrages and parachute bombs. On May 24, with monsoon rains adding to the misery, the call for evacuation came, saw the tour to the time swap to be manifested within Bering in the Presser Tok. The withdrawal was costly, with 19 men laid out on stretchers and 30 dead having to be left behind. Mules slowed when they couldn't descend the muddy 3,000-foot mountain trails. Concurrently, Maikikina became the focal point of a brutal attritional struggle. On May 17, the combined Merrill's marauders, now led by Colonel Hunter after Merrill's evacuation, launched their attack on the Maikikina airfield. It was a critical, albeit bloody, success, providing a vital logistical hub. This period exposed the immense suffering. By May 19th, Stilwell noted a stream of cargo planes, C-46 and C-47s, flying into Mite-Kiana day and night, evacuating up to 150 wounded marauders daily to infirmaries in India. It was a crucial lifeline, demonstrating the vital role of air power in overcoming geographical barriers. The campaign for Mite-Kiana was a grinding war of attrition. Despite the airfield's capture, the city itself remained a Japanese stronghold, defended by thousands of Japanese defenders. The Japanese, though starving and cut off, defended tenaciously from their bunkered positions. Friendly fire incidents among the Chinese X-Force were not uncommon. On May 17, 18 Chinese battalions fired upon themselves, resulting in 671 casualties at their own hands. This highlights the immense difficulty of coordination and the human cost of confusion. By June 3, Mite-Kiana Commander General Hayden Boatner radioed about the stalled campaign, with 320 Chinese troops lost in a single day and airfields closed due to monsoon rains. Stilwell himself, now a 4-star general as of August 1, 1944, was under immense pressure. His diary entries reveal his anxieties and frustrations, his dreams of drowning children. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the theatre, a massive Japanese invasion of India was underway. Operation Yugo, launched by General Mutaguchi, this offensive, beginning in March 1944, was built on speed and encirclement. Mutaguchi aimed for a march on Delhi, believing he could exploit Indian nationalist sentiment and defeat the British in a matter of weeks. However, General Masakazu Kawabe, senior Japanese commander in Burma, questioned the strategic necessity of capturing Dimapur, a critical rail junction. This early divergence hinted at flaws in Japanese planning and a crucial missed opportunity. The Japanese 40,000-man invasion army moved with 2,000 cattle and oxen for transport and provisions. But their logistical shortcomings were severe. They relied heavily on captured supplies and grossly underestimated the war's duration and the British resolve. They attacked mostly with rifles and light machine guns. The British, however, possessed tanks, 75mm artillery, and critical air resupply capabilities. The Yugo invasion began with a feint 1944, the 10,000-troop Arakan feint. Operation Hargo captured Longyaun or Flag Hill, defended by clerks and typists, not combat soldiers. This provided an initial morale boost for the Japanese, but their main thrust was towards Sinswaya. On February 7, 1944, over 2,000 Japanese troops of the 55th Infantry Division under Lieutenant General Shozo Sakurai massed above Sinswaya. They launched a full-scale aerial attack, followed by a ground assault. The hospital at Sinswaya was breached, and Indian medical officer Lieutenant Basu witnessed the massacre and execution of prisoners. This moment of extreme brutality galvanized the British defense. The British admin box at Sinswaya, approximately 1,200 yards square, was a large, open, centrally located defensive encampment. While a liability for visibility, it offered strong defensive lines for concentrated firepower. The Japanese employed their cylinder position operation, or Ento Jinchi Sakusen, funneling troops and fire from surrounding hills. On February 11, 1944, a Japanese battalion attempted to infiltrate the admin box. Sentry Maloney of the West Yorks, positioned in a creek bed, launched an ambush, turning a critical infiltration route into a devastating Japanese trap. This small-scale tactical success was crucial. By February 21, the 2,190 Japanese soldiers surrounding Sinswaya were reduced to a mere 400. Night assaults on February 14 and 16 were repulsed with heavy losses. The decimation of Japanese forces at the admin box marked the failure of the initial invasion phase. This battle proved definitively that the Japanese could be defeated and pounded until they shattered. It instilled confidence in the regular British Army for future, larger battles in Burma. The Yugo invasion pressed on. In March 1944, Japanese forces blocked the Tidham Road, isolating British divisions. On March 18, they seized the British supply dump at Tongzang, but these early successes ultimately led to Japanese overextension. On April 5, 1944, Lieutenant General Kotoku Sato's 31st Division, nearly 20,000 men strong, attacked Kohima. The Kohima garrison had only 3,800 troops to defend, fewer than 1,500 being trained infantry. This severe underestimation of British defences and overwhelming Japanese logistical failures led to its swift unravelling. By April 6, the Kohima Defensive Force contracted its perimeter. The siege of Kohima became a microcosm of the larger struggle. 3,800 British and Indian soldiers were trapped in a 400 to 500-yard triangular zone. Japanese pole charges, 25 pounds of explosive in ammunition boxes, were used to blast Japanese from their sandbag and concrete pillbox positions. On April 7th, the British decided to retake the field supply depot and Supply Hill. Lance Corporal John Harmon, in an act of superhuman bravery, recaptured these positions, though he was mortally wounded. This desperate defense of Kohima, coupled with the critical aborted attack on Dimapur, presented Japan with its greatest missed opportunity. The failure to capture this vital rail junction fundamentally limited their potential for success. General Sato's division alone suffered 3,000 dead and 4,000 wounded in 6 weeks at Kohima. By May 13th, General Sato first requested permission to remove his forces from combat. His men were starving, diseased, one regiment reduced from 3,800 to 460 troops, half of whom could still fire a rifle. Sato defied General Mutaguchi's inflexible orders to hold. On May 25th, Sato informed Mutaguchi he was withdrawing, and on May 31st, he ordered the full withdrawal of his troops from Kohima. This act marked a significant breach in Japanese military discipline and a defeat. The Japanese invasion army was disintegrating. Mutaguchi's final order was chilling. Continue in the task until all of your ammunition is expended. If your hands are broken, fight with your feet. If your hands and feet are broken, use your teeth. If there is no breath left in your body, fight with your spirit. Lack of weapons is no excuse for defeat. But valor alone could not overcome logistical collapse. The myth of the invincible Japanese warrior, while acknowledging their fanatical devotion, was shattered. By June 22nd, the 5th Indian Division reopened the road between Kohima and Imphal. This reconnection of vital arteries allowed for free movement of Allied men and supplies, signaling a decisive shift. On July 8, 1944, the Japanese were ordered to withdraw from India back into Burma. The Yugo invasion resulted in a catastrophic defeat, marking the beginning of Japan's collapse in Burma. While the Japanese suffered this monumental defeat, in eastern China, a different kind of catastrophe was unfolding. The Japanese Ichigo offensive, launched in April 1944, employed 15 full divisions and 5 independent brigades. It exposed the profound strategic and political failures of Kai-shek, validating Stilwell's long-standing warnings. Chiang's nationalist army, despite his assurances, was poorly equipped and unprepared. His persistent diversion and withholding of critical Lend-Lease supplies from his most effective generals, like General Sui Ye, the Tiger of Changsha, crippled Chinese military operations. Changsha, a city Shu Ye had successfully defended before, fell in June 1944. The official Chinese claim was a Japanese poison gas attack, but an American sergeant witnessed the entire Chinese army evacuate overnight, suggesting a strategic withdrawal, not a forced evacuation. The fall of Hengyang in August 1944 further exposed Chiang's manipulations. Journalist Theodore H. Hay White documented the historic defense by 2 under-equipped regiments, a few hundred men. He described soldiers as wiry, brown, thin, in threadbare uniforms, carrying 2 grenades with blue stockings filled with rice kernels as rations, broken feet in straw sandals, and leaf-woven hats for camouflage. They possessed only 2 ancient 75mm cannons from 111, with a total of 200 shells. 12,000 tons of guns and ammunition, authorized for Hengyang, never arrived. Chiang had diverted them. Chenault, old Leatherface, even offered 1,000 tons of weaponry, conditional on bypassing the central government, acknowledging the risk of them not reaching Chuzhouye. The myth that air power alone could win the war in China, championed by Chenault, proved insufficient against a determined ground assault. On July 6, 1944, President Roosevelt dispatched a direct letter to Chiang Kai-shek, delivered by Major General Patrick W. Insam Baum-Day, Hurley. It was, as Stilwell noted in his diary, a hot firecracker with a firecracker in every sentence. Roosevelt directly confronted Chiang with the strategic disaster, proposing Stilwell as the solution. He stated, "I know of no other man who has the ability, the force, and the determination to offset the disaster which now threatens China," and recommended Stilwell to command all Chinese and American forces threatening Chiang to be prepared to accept the consequences and assume the personal responsibility if ignored. On September 19, 1944, at Chiang Kai-shek's private residence in Chongqing, Stilwell forcefully, and perhaps insensitively, read Roosevelt's letter aloud. His diary entry captured the moment. The harpoon hit the little bugger right in the solar plexus and went right through him. This was a profound personal and cultural affront to Chiang, a loss of face in front of his subordinates. Chiang, however, stubbornly refused. His foreign minister, T.V. Soong, telegraphed Harry Hopkins, "The War Department wants to force General Stilwell down his Chiang Kai-shek's throat. I personally assure you without qualification that on this point the Generalissimo will not and cannot yield." Chiang prioritized political control over military victory, believing American support was guaranteed regardless of his actions. This was the showdown Stilwell had foreseen. Stilwell, despite his successes in Burma, training Chinese troops, clearing North Burma and reopening the Burma Road, was deemed unfitted for the vast and complex duties by Chiang. Chiang also reacted with shock to news of Mao Zedong's 3 million-man Chinese Communist force being prepared to join the fight, albeit with restrictions to lands north of the Yellow River and lend-lease equipment for only 5 divisions. Chiang's primary concern remains Stilwell's removal. On October 19, 1944, the axe fell. George Marshall sent an advance radio message to Stilwell, informing him of his immediate recall. Chiang even offered Stilwell the special Grand Gordon of the Blue Sky and White Sun decoration, which Stilwell refused. On October 21, 1944, Stilwell departed Chongqing. His removal, despite his battlefield successes in Burma, resulted in a significant weakening of Allied command and strategy in China. The China-Burma-India Theatre was dissolved into India-Burma, commanded by Daniel Sultan, and China, commanded by Albert C. Wedemeyer, who became Chiang's chief of staff. The consequences for China were catastrophic. On November 10, 1944, Kwelin fell to the Japanese 11th Army. The nationalist forces defending the city had only 2,000 usable rifles and little ammunition for 14,000 men. Days later, Luchou also fell, allowing Japanese forces to unite and move ominously towards Chongqing, Chiang's wartime capital. Wedemeyer complained of Chiang and his advisors being impotent and confounded, and Chinese army commanders fossilized by political intrigues and false pride. This collapse, spurred by Chiang's defiance, nearly defies being impotent and confounded. In a desperate act to deny the Japanese advances, Major Frank Gleason's OSS unit blew up huge ammunition dumps at Tushan, including 50 new artillery pieces, tens of thousands of shells, and 20 tons of dynamite. This devastation caused Japanese scouts to report the destruction, leading the main invasion force to halt its large-scale movement to the city. In Burma, however, the tide had turned decisively. The Japanese were evacuating India and western Burma, leaving skeletal forces. At Tamu Town, over 550 Japanese casualties were found unburied in the streets. Emaciated and decaying, Japanese troop numbers in Burma were reduced from 85,000 to a mere 20 to 30,000. General Haitaro Kimura, the new Japanese commander, made the strategic decision to retreat beyond the Irrawaddy to create a defensive wall. The Allied triumph in the Burma Road campaign was a hard-won, multifaceted victory. By January 1945, after fierce ground offensives, General Sultan's X-Force successfully crossed the Irrawaddy, establishing a vital pontoon bridge. This engineering feat directly enabled the unification of the Lido and Burma roads. On January 28, 1945, the first convoy from India arrived in Kunming, China, carrying 170 vehicles. The Stilwell Road, renamed in his honor, was now officially open. Simultaneously, the 10th Air Force conducted a systematic bombing campaign, crucial in degrading Japanese supply lines and infrastructure. Decisive bombing missions against the bridges on the Kwai River, the infamous bridge on the River Kwai, effectively severed a critical supply artery for the Japanese. This strategic isolation, combined with the Japanese army's systemic undersupply, led to their complete and perplexing collapse. William Slim's 14th Army executed a strategic encirclement of Japanese forces, culminating in the planned entrapment near Mandalay and Maikitula. The X-Force, once skinny and sickly, had been transformed through battlefield experience into a force of fearsome competence. They had retaken and secured 50,000 square miles of Burma. The reopening of the Burma Road facilitated vital supply lines, reinforcing the Allied offensive. The degradation of Japanese infrastructure and supply routes significantly weakened their military capabilities and morale. This campaign, often overshadowed by other theaters, was a testament to extraordinary endurance. It highlighted the critical importance of ground offensives, innovative aerial bombardment, and the strategic isolation of Japanese forces. It came at immense human cost, but ultimately contributed to the Allied victory in the Pacific theater, denying Japan crucial resources and strategic positions. The Burma Road, a symbol of Allied resolve and sacrifice, stood open. The Burma Road, a symbol of Allied resolve and sacrifice, stood open. Its completion was a testament to extraordinary logistical ingenuity. Led by General Pick's engineers, they had floated into place a pontoon bridge 1,080 feet long, a vital artery across the formidable Irrawaddy. This opened the path for Pick's first convoy, departing Lado, India, on January 12, 1945. 113 vehicles began the arduous 100-mile journey. Jeeps, Peace, CMC 6x6 cargo trucks, Chrysler weapons carriers. Their goal, Kunming, China, an estimated 2-week trip. General Daniel I to Badir Sea, General Daniel I, Commodore Daniel I, Sultan and General Louis Pick oversaw the historic start. Banners on the lead truck proudly declared, "First Convoy Ledo Road, Pick's Pike Lifeline to China." That lead truck was even equipped with a manned anti-aircraft gun. The convoy crossed the Bailey Bridge at Jayaranpur, then the formidable Hellgate Bridge. They ascended to Pangsao Pass, 3,737 feet high. A bivouac at mile 109 marked Stilwell's first field headquarters at Xingbuyang. They passed through Namlit, noting its thatched stilt houses and Naga women. Then, into the vast Hukorn Valley where signs of recent conflict abounded, burned-out tanks and destroyed Japanese vehicles. American-style service stations and airstrips appeared every 20 to 30 miles. They crossed the Tarung River via another pontoon bridge and forded the Tanai River. Mainquan and Wallabum, sites of significant past battles, were passed. Arrival at Shaduzup on January 13, 1945, marked 179 miles covered. The journey continued through fog and mud past Inkagatong and Kamangar. In the Irrawaddy Valley, liaison aircraft were sighted, and war correspondents and photographers met them near Maitkaina at Pick's Triangle. By January 15, 1945, they reached Maikina 287 miles from Lado, facing a 2-week wait amid bureaucratic rivalry with the Tenchang Kuduf caravan. On January 23, 1945, they departed Maitikina, crossing the Irrawaddy on that crucial 180-foot pontoon bridge. Arrival at Bamo, 369 miles from Ledo, soon followed. A 40-mile run to Namkham on January 24, 1945, revealed Namkham as a smoking ruin, its structures smashed. The final breakthrough came on January 27, 1945, a crowning day for the Allies in Burma. General Dan Sultan had led the combined X-Force and Mars Task Force to unite the Ledo and Burma roads. X-Force, with its armoured advance and tanks sporting 75mm cannons, demolished structures and cleared the path to Qinghai. They met the Y-Force pushing down the road from China, who had driven Japanese from Mangshi and Zheifang. Japanese forces retreating were killed at a 6-to-1 ratio. The meeting occurred at a crossroads, marked by American tanks. Brigadier General George Sliney intervened to prevent friendly fire between X and Y forces. Y-Force soldiers were awestruck by X-Force's modern equipment, troop carrier trucks, artillery and tanks. Between September 1944 and January 1945, Japanese losses at Lungling, Tenjung and Songshan reached 19,620 dead. Chinese Y-Force losses totaled 37,133 dead. This overland lifeline was not secured without immense effort. General Slim's strategic deception had lured Japanese forces north with a dummy IV Corps headquarters, sending faked radio messages. The real IV Corps, in radio silence, advanced south to Maikitila, crossing the Irrawaddy south of Mandalay. This was part of Slim's audacious plan to entrap General Kimura's forces. General William Slim, commanding the 14th Army, was crucial in this strategic entrapment. Simultaneously, an amphibious attack on Kangol began January 22, 1945. 5 days of intense fighting blocked the highway south from the Arakan Peninsula. Japanese forces scattered into the forest, facing starvation, disease, and malaria. Infantryman Susumu Miyashita would detail the dire conditions of that brutal withdrawal, a collapse of morale that was widespread. Japanese were down to a single bastion west of the Irrawaddy, near Mandalay, by January 1945. The Central Burma campaign culminated in the fall of Fort Dufferin in Mandalay in March 1945. The fort, with its 225-foot wide moat and 25-foot walls, was a formidable Japanese stand. British forces captured Mandalay Hill, also known as Pagoda Hill. Gurkha detachments cleared snipers from its temples and pagodas. The Allies employed 500-pound and 2,000-pound aerial bombs to pound the stronghold. On March 20, 1945, Japanese forces escaped through drain pipes under the moat. Aerial superiority played a decisive role, particularly from the 10th Air Force. Over a 3-month stretch of 1944, they flew more than 8,500 sorties, dropping over 3.7 million pounds of bombs. During the fighting at Maitkina alone, 754 tons of bombs were dropped on entrenched Japanese. The 7th Bomb Group, known as bomber gluttons, used extreme measures. They steel-strapped 250-pound bombs to 500-pound ones, packing 12,000 pounds into a B-24, designed for 8,800 pounds. As 1944 became 1945, the 10th Air Force was doing the heaviest damage to the enemy. Theodore White chronicled the transformation and pride of Stilwell's divisions. Despite the triumphs, the strategic landscape was shifting dramatically. The Lado-Burma Road, despite the immense effort, was already becoming obsolete. The Allied chiefs had opted to attack Japan from the Pacific Islands. The overland approach to Japan through China had become unnecessary. The war on Japan would now be fought from the sky by planes off Pacific Ocean islands. The fight to keep China in the war became almost pointless. On January 28, 1945, General Louis Pick cut the ceremonial tape at the Burma-China border at Mongyu and Wanding, Yunnan Province. Signs marked the distances: Ledado 478 miles / Kuning 566 miles. Prominent figures attended: General Sultan Chennault Howard Davidson, Sun Li Jen, Wei Li Huang, and T.V. Sung. General Stilwell's congratulatory message was read, even as the strategic winds had changed. The Burma Road had become obsolete even as it was being opened. Pick's first convoy arrived in Kunming on February 4, 1945, 24 days and 1,100 miles after leaving Lido. Lung Yun, governor of Yunnan province, welcomed Pick. He officially renamed the road the Stilwell Road, a directive from Chiang Kai-shek. But the war had moved on. Meanwhile, other vital targets required unique aerial tactics. For 6 months, regular bombing efforts were made to damage the Kwai bridges. Between January and April 1945, T-333 flew 52 bombing missions. Chuck Feineman, a 20-year-old pilot known as Curly, was at the controls of T-333. His new B-24, ferried to CBI in August 1944, was equipped with sophisticated radar for night recon and painted black instead of camouflage. His crew included Bill Henderson, T-333's bombardier. Known for his precision, on April 2, 1945, Sims piloted a B-24 that destroyed the steel bridge on the River Kwai. The next day, April 3, 1945, T-333 targeted the wooden bridge over the Kwai at 8:59 a.m. T-333's formation began its run. They utilized skip bombing technique, releasing bombs in a shallow dive to skip across water and explode on bridge abutments. Customized B-24 bomb bays carried specific types of weapons, including fragmentation banana bombs. The destruction of these bridges cut crucial Japanese supply lines. The Sitang River crossing became a catastrophic event for retreating Japanese forces. Susumu Miyashita described it as the cruelest event of the whole war. From an original division strength of 16,575 men, only 4,492 survived. 11,000 Japanese deaths occurred during the withdrawal from the Sitang River. Overloaded bamboo rafts sank, sending thousands to their watery graves. 10,000 Japanese troops drowned at the Sitang River crossing. This immense human cost became the grim legacy of their defeat. General Wedemeyer flew X-Force divisions to Kunming to counter Japanese movements. He also worked to upgrade the nationalist Chinese army, introducing nutritionists, logicians, and weapons training experts. By the time Okinawa fell, 12,000 Americans were dead and 36,000 wounded. Over 100,000 Imperial Japanese soldiers were killed on Okinawa. General Joseph W. Ndiria, General Joseph W.A. Stilwell, after his controversial recall in September 1944, was redeployed to critical commands, including Operation Blacklist, the invasion of Korea in August 1945. He died on October 12, 1946, his health failing after the intense pressures of the CBI theatre. The CBI theatre, often seen as secondary, had tied down significant Japanese forces. The hump flights, carrying nearly 8 tons per C-47, had been a critical lifeline since December 23, 1941, when Captain Charles L. Butzer-Summoney's Ferdi Principle 1, when Captain Charles L. Sharp made the first flight, ferrying 16 troops. The Ledo Road construction, a monumental feat, required moving an estimated 13.5 million cubic yards of earth. It featured 700 bridges, a 478-mile, all-weather track. It was generally 10 inches thick and from 20 to 28 feet wide. Oared wing gates chindits, with their unconventional snakes of single-file columns, disrupted Japanese supply lines through deep penetration raids. Major General Joe Lintain took over after Wingate's death. The battles of Imphal and Kohima, from March 1944 to May 1945, halted the Japanese advance into India. The siege at Anpumgar showcased the brutal fighting. The British evacuation of Burma in 1942 left 800,000 tons of supplies abandoned in Rangoon. 60,000 Allied POW toiled on the Burma-Siam Railway. Cholera outbreaks and fever of unknown origin plagued soldiers. The grim visual of a dead marauder dangled like a horrific marionette haunted the landscape. Japanese desperation led to soldiers detonating hand grenades on themselves or choking themselves with blankets. The retreat was described as rain, rain, mud, 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 mud. The battle for the tennis court at Kohima became a symbol of ferocious close-quarters combat. In China, Mao Zedong's Chinese Communist Army, a fearsome war machine, attacked Japanese everywhere at once, often overrunning them like a prairie fire. Mao strategized to prove Chinese communist value to the US through unstoppable war and planned to control the seacoast. Huang Chen, Mao's best field commander, led attacks in northern Yunnan province. Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek's political maneuvers and Stilwell's removal illustrated the inter-allied friction. Major General Albert C.C. Disth Distc Wedemeyer succeeded Stilwell, tasked with rebuilding trust. Major General Patrick J. Hurley, U.S. Ambassador to China, was involved in Stilwell's recall. Major General Karl Eifler, head of Detachment 101, was replaced due to conflicts. The Ichigo offensive was a massive Japanese push towards Kwelin and Lusho. The legacy of this theatre still casts a long shadow. In present-day Myanmar, a palpable atmosphere of mistrust persists. The government, the State Peace and Development Council, employs thousands of informants. Billboards proclaim, "Only when there is discipline will there be progress." Another warns, "Anyone who is riotous, destructive, or unruly is our enemy." Jameson Ko, a Chinese national born in Myanmar, once a fixer for foreign films, now works for the British Embassy. And Ko, a Chinese national born in Myanmar, once a fixer for foreign films, now works for the British Destructive or Run Films and now works for the British Embassy. During Chinese New Year in 2001 in Yangon's Chinatown, he witnessed children demanding money, then dispersing after an older man's intervention. Soon, 2 men intervened to read what Ko was writing in his notebook. The taxi driver observed that Buddhist tenets of placidity and peaceful acceptance reinforce inaction against the government. Jameson Ko's subsequent caution underscored the constant awareness of being watched. Across the border in China, the subtle human semaphore and homey wood smoke of Myanmar give way to neon lights, granite-sheathed skyscraper hotels, and audio speakers blaring pop music in Ruili. The historical Burma Road, once essential, now sits as a 2-lane cobblestone track, clinging precariously. Below it, a new 6-lane highway carves efficiently through the valley floor. Liu Xiaosang, a 75-year-old goatherd, embodies this transition. He helped build 6 miles of the old Burma Road in 1937. 7 days a week, from sunrise to sunset, he recounted. They gave us no tools, no food or money. The other local people were expected to feed us. Engineers warned them, if you do not do that, you will have trouble. Prison. During the Japanese occupation, soldiers would ask, are you a farmer, a laborer, or a rifleman? Liu Shaokang always chose farmer to avoid being shot. He paused, looking at the overgrown old road. I know it's famous, he admitted, but it's now forgotten. To me, I use it, but I can't eat it. He motioned to the gleaming new highway below. And really, it has too many turns. I say, take the new highway and leave this road to the goats and to the past.